Past, Present, and Occult podcast with me, Emiliano Noriega Petty. In today's episode, I'm going to begin by talking about the Buddha. Then I'll begin discussing meditation. I just want to show you how his life is an example of why you need to try different types of meditation. Now, when I say the Buddha, that probably brings a number of images to mind. A number of you, especially in the West, might think of a particularly fat man. This is not the Buddha that we are going to be talking about today. That Buddha most of the time is Maitreya, in case you're wondering what his name is, and that's the Buddha who Buddhists think is coming in the future, sort of like how Christ comes again, or how there's the Mahdi in Islam. It's their reoccurrence figure at their end times. No, the Buddha that I want to talk about today was originally a man named Siddhartha Gautama. Most scholars agree that he exists. However, a large amount of the biographical information we have about him is basically impossible to prove or is so mystical or magical that it most likely didn't occur, at least from the perspective of scholars. Like most big religious figures, his name means something. His given name, or what we would call his first name, Siddhartha, means he who achieves his goal. His clan name, Gautama, means he who has the most light. Now, he did not leave his house to begin this meditation practice or this attempt to become enlightened until he was 29 years old. So for any of you who feel that you haven't done enough yet, you have plenty of time even if you're going to compare yourself to somebody like the Buddha. On top of which, he did not achieve enlightenment until 6 years later when he was 35 years old. Buddhists then believe that he taught for roughly 45 years. Some traditions argue he doesn't get enlightened until he's 40, and then he teaches for 40 years. What matters is that nobody disagrees that the Buddha failed to become enlightened until he was at least 35 years old. So there's plenty of time. However, what is the Buddha doing during this time that he is still not enlightened? The simplest way to put it is that he tries various other ways of becoming enlightened, various other meditation practices or ascetic practices. He began his meditation practice with meditation teachers, and moving on from them, he then began to devote himself to extreme ascetic practices. These practices included limiting the amount of food that he ate, refusing to move for long periods of time, attempting to make his mind focus on one thing or nothing for days or weeks at a time. Basically, anything that you might consider the practice of a monk or a similar figure, he tried that, but he took it to the most absolute extreme he could every time. The best example of this is he once decided as an ascetic practice to give up food, and you can see statues of the Buddha that show him trying to do this, that show him completely emaciated. After trying these practices for a fair number of years, he realized that although he was capable of sticking with the program for a long time, nothing that he was doing was actually causing him to become enlightened. This causes him to abandon these extreme practices. He then develops what's called the middle way, becomes enlightened, officially becomes the Buddha, and begins to teach and preach across the subcontinent of India. Now, I wanted to tell you that story to give you an example that even somebody who's considered probably the best meditator in the world did not get it right and had to try a number of different types of meditation before even he found out what really worked for him. All of this is to say, no type of meditation is going to work perfectly for any one person. Buddhist monks, Jainist monks, Hindu ascetics, they all have a different way of meditating. Nobody is going to get there using the exact same path. Let me go over some of those ways now. I'll start with the one that happened to be the Buddha's favorite, and although he's often shown seated, he actually really enjoyed walking meditation. Before I do though, I want to discuss what's the point of meditating at all. After all, you don't have all the time in the world. Why spend it doing this? Also, what is the goal of meditation? Are we all trying to do the same thing while we're meditating, even if we're meditating different ways? So first, what are some reasons meditating is useful? Well, it helps you relax, relaxing helps you to sleep, all of these things help you to calm down and hopefully be a better person. It also helps you to develop patience and get a sense of how your mind works so that you can begin controlling your actions rather than just reacting to everything. Now, let's move on to the goals. In terms of goals, meditation could be said to have two basic ones. The goal is either to completely empty the mind one way or another, or to focus on one particular thing at the expense of everything else. The meditation technique is then done to help you actually do one of those two things. By successfully achieving one of the two goals and doing that more often, you'll develop the skills that I mentioned previously. With that said, let's describe walking meditation. Ideally, you're going to be able to do this either in a park or on a hiking trail that is rather flat. If you can't do that, a treadmill can work if you're okay doing this at home. First, decide which goal you're trying to go for. Are you going to try to completely empty your mind, or are you going to try to focus on just one thing? It's okay to pick either or, and you're more than welcome to pick the one that you think you're going to be best at initially. Ideally, you're going to want to practice both of these end goals while you're meditating. It, however, cannot be done at the same time, so you should pick one meditation session to focus on, let's say, emptying your mind, and then a separate meditation session where you focus on thinking about just one particular topic. Once you've gotten to the place that you're going to walk in and have safely set yourself up there, begin walking along the path and try to find a point in the middle distance that you can focus on without hyperfixating on anything in the immediate area. Start by listening and taking in all of the various sounds that you can hear, from the birds to the people playing to others walking and talking. Use the moment to develop a real awareness of the present. At this point, the goal is not to either empty the mind or fixate on one thing, yet the goal is to simply develop this awareness that causes you to calm down and be in the moment and ready. This preparation period, where you're just trying to notice your immediate surroundings without thinking about them, should last anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes. If you have just begun practicing meditation, this 10 or 15 minutes is all you'll really need to do in the beginning. Don't even worry that you haven't officially begun to meditate yet. This mindfulness and awareness practice is still extremely helpful. Now, after doing that for an appropriate amount of time, you can begin meditating while you're walking. To do this, if your goal is to empty your mind, you simply need to continue walking about, and as thoughts and feelings come up in your mind, let them simply sink back without allowing yourself to think about them or indulge in them. A good mental image that I try to give my students when they're conceptualizing this is, consider your mind as an ocean. Your thoughts and feelings are various things that are rising out of the ocean, and you're just going to let them sink back down and move on. In short, without me actually being there to guide you through it, that's how walking meditation would work if you're trying to empty your mind. If you're trying to fixate on one thing in particular, then with the same mental imagery, allow thoughts and feelings to arise, but continually drag one particular image or a feeling out of the ocean to continue to think about. In practice, what does this actually mean? That means that if you're walking around and somebody makes a noise or a bird does whatever, you allow your consciousness to register that event without actually indulging in it. An easier way to explain that is to say that you can't stop your ears from hearing and your eyes from seeing while you're doing this type of meditation, so you accept that the event happened, that you saw it, that it interrupted you, and you move on. Now, funnily or interestingly enough, any other meditation technique works basically the same way, except that you're not moving and you get to close your eyes, or keep them open if you're going to stare at something. So at this point, you might want to ask, then why are there so many quote-unquote different ways to meditate? To be honest, there are many different meditation positions, but ultimately there's only two goals to meditation, and unless you're moving about, everything is either some version of walking meditation or sitting meditation. As I said earlier, all types of meditation develop certain skills such as reflection, relaxation, calmness, and whatnot. However, these skills will be developed by practicing any form of meditation. There just happen to be certain forms of it that will better develop certain skills as opposed to others. As an example, I tend to find that walking meditation while having the goal in mind of emptying my mind tends to get me better at relaxing and being calm. I have then also found that sitting meditation while trying to focus on one particular thing has helped me to develop my focusing skill. So basically, with the information that I've given you here, you can see that you're probably going to have to try a few different types of meditation until you find what works for you if you have never meditated before. By learning how to meditate with one of these various goals in mind, you are going to successfully develop the skills that come out of meditation. Now, let me make it very clear that the skills that meditation develops are not the goal of meditation. The goal of meditating is not to develop these skills. The goal of meditating is to do something with these skills and with your mind in the long run, and that is to become enlightened. Now, what does that mean? Well, depending on the religious tradition that you belong to, you could believe that enlightenment is becoming one with God through the process of meditation and actualization, or if you have a more Buddhist or Eastern way of looking at it, you could see enlightenment as the discovery of ultimate reality, in which you escape from the bonds of reincarnation and you become part of this new class of being that's just superior. Regardless, it is the tradition and that particular flavor of, let's call it faith or religion, that you practice that's going to affect what you're looking for at the end of the enlightenment journey. Some people will practice meditation with the goal of emptying their mind as a way to hear the voice of God. Other people will do it with the goal of being able to realize where their soul begins and ends and what's the difference between their consciousness and reality. We can get lost in debate about what's better to do here, but ultimately what's best to do for you is going to involve a bit of self-discovery. The final thing I'd like to discuss when it comes to meditation is its relationship and usefulness in the occult. So let me give you something you can work with. An occultist, magician, whatever they're going to call themselves, has a particular goal in mind when it comes to their practice. Their goal is usually best described as achieving knowledge of the ultimate truth. They're going to do this through ritual practice, and meditation is going to help them in these specific ways. Magicians and occultists will generally agree with the following statement, which is that your true will is what makes the magic happen. Meditation, in this particular context, then helps you do two things. It helps you figure out on one level what your true will is, and then on another, it helps you to direct and control your true will during magical or occult ritual practice. So an occultist or magician, if they were looking to begin meditation, or if somebody wanted to become one of those things, this is how I would suggest they do it. A person looking to develop themselves along these particular lines should do the following. When they are meditating with the goal of emptying their mind, they should do this with the understanding that in ritual, this is how it will become helpful. Let me give you an example. The ability to empty your mind, according to an occultist or a magician, is usually helpful because it allows you, let's say, during divination, to keep your mind empty and open to receive an actual message or revelation without coloring it yourself with your own preconceived notions. Meditating while trying to have the goal of fixation in mind would help you in your magical practice by allowing you to focus your will during ritual to achieve the outcome of the ritual. You see, occultists and magicians tend to think that if you're not really focused during ritual or magical practice, the thing that you're trying to do never works. The simplest way to describe it is the more focused that you can be, the more likely the outcome you're going for is to arrive. It's a more complicated way of explaining what people tend to call manifesting these days. Ultimately, whatever you're going to use meditation for, the thing that's going to make you good at it is consistency in practice. This is not something that you become very good at within a week or even a month. You're going to put some serious time into it, and the benefits will come to you then. As I mentioned earlier, I would recommend starting with nothing more than 10 or 15 minutes of simply awareness and mindfulness practice in the beginning until you feel you have a real hang of that. The reason I suggest that is that's the opening of any meditation practice, so mastering that is key. In the next episode of this podcast, I'm going to specifically cover magical traditions. I'm going to do this with the goal in mind of helping you pick which one you might want to affiliate yourself with. I'll be covering several, including Thelema, the Golden Dawn, and my very own. For those of you who have been listening and feel, gosh, I really don't think this is enough information, I'm going to need some more guidance. Well, to be honest, meditation is best taught in some direct way. Zoom is really not the best, but it's best to have a teacher you can speak to. When developing any worthwhile skill, you really have to consider the fact that it's rare for a person to be able to pull that kind of achievement off without help from some sort of teacher of the craft, at least in the beginning. Don't be upset about this, just accept it, take the teachings, and make them your own so you can move on. If you need help in this process of self-discovery, I could give you some examples of where you could find this help. If you happen to live in the Los Angeles area like I do, there are two places, if you don't mind Buddhism, where you can learn different forms of Buddhist meditation. One is completely free, the other costs an amount usually between $20 to $60. It depends on how long they're having it. I'll start with the free option first, and that one is located near San Diego at a monastery called Metta. That's M-E-T-T-A. You can easily find them if you Google Metta Monastery. The monastery is constantly in what they call retreat mode. It is in the Thai forest-style tradition of Theravada Buddhism. Basically means that the monks try to live as authentically as they can. You are allowed to visit them basically any time between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. During that time, you can engage with the monastery, have a little bit of a day retreat, so to say, and try to experience the Theravada tradition of meditation. It's considered good manners to bring a food offering for the monks because they will eat it and you'll get to enjoy some of it too at one point in the day. If you want to look up more information about them, go ahead and give them a Google. Now, moving on to the one that costs a little bit of money, this is in the Mahayana Pure Land tradition. The monastery in question is called Silai or Shilai Temple. It's in Hacienda Heights. I'm not sure about the the pronunciation because I've heard the monks there say it both ways. They have a retreat that's usually at least for 1 night, 2 nights, or a week. You pay an amount of money, and then they teach you various Mahayana Pure Land ways of meditating. They're going to be very different from the Thai forest tradition, but if you want to experience 2 very different ways and get them taught to you properly, it's not a bad option. I also happen to be available for spiritual guidance, and you're welcome to book me and ask me questions through my website, www.enplectures.com. You can also book me for a lecture if you would like on there. In short, if you need help, and even the Buddha needed help in the beginning, there are free and paid for options that you can find. It depends on what kind of teacher and tradition you like. And yes, at this stage in the game, you should be prioritizing a teacher or a teaching tradition that you get along with well, because your spiritual journey shouldn't be that difficult from the beginning. The point of the beginning is to learn, not to necessarily make it your own immediately. A good teacher and tradition will give you the tools to make all of what they teach you your own unique thing, but doing that right away is often tricky and leads to getting waylaid or never really getting to the end goal. That's just my thought. You're more than welcome to prove me wrong. Well, that's really all that I have to say today. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I also want to give you an update that next month at my Masonic Lodge, 3 Great Lights 323 in Whittier, California, there is going to be a lecture by Brother Michael Samu. He's a friend of mine. It'll be on the 19th, and it's about numbers and their sacred meaning. If you have been interested in joining Freemasonry or just curious about it in general, I'll be giving a talk entitled Welcome to Freemasonry in August. It'll be on the 16th at 7 p.m. at 3 Great Lights Lodge in Whittier, California. Please bring your questions, and I hope to see you there. If you have any questions or comments about this episode, go ahead and send them to me. If you have any topic suggestions, go ahead and send those as well. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can do so at @NoriagaPetty. And as a final reminder, you can book me for spiritual direction or a lecture at www.enplectures.com. Let me just say thank you one last time for listening. This has been Emiliano Noriega Petty, your host for Past, Present, and Occult. Have a good day.